Welcome to the next part of our video where we will be using the data from the Sustainable Society Index to start to build a data story about water and how inequality might be affecting water. So we've loaded the data into our Tableau, and we've previously cleaned and audited it, and it's in very good shape. Now this data is collected at the country level, so that there's one data point for each country over each year from 2006 to 2016. Now this data is nice and clean. There's no countries with missing data, and there's a pretty broad representation of countries in the data set. So this is one of the reasons that we've chosen to use this data set. It's in really nice shape. It's going to be really easy to work with this kind of data. Not always the case, but makes for a great example. So now that we have our data, and we are going to look first at one variable at a time to make sure that we understand the relationship of each variable. Then we're going to look at two variables at a time. Then we'll look at three variables or more at a time. And then we'll talk about putting it all together in a story. So let's look at Tableau, and there are a couple of different types of variables. Remember, two basic types: number variables and non-number variables. There's many subgroups and details within those two, but the most important thing you need to remember are number variables and non-number variables. So let's look at an example of each. For our number variable, we're going to look at the percent of people in a country who have sufficient water to drink. So in Tableau, that title of that variable is called percent sufficient to drink. So we'll drag it over here into the rows column, and here we are looking at this numeric variable summarized. So this is the sum. The word sum appears here. This is the sum, which isn't very meaningful. So let's change that, and we want to look at the average. So the average is 86.39. So roughly 86% of the people who live in all the countries that are included in this data set have sufficient water to drink. That's interesting, but we need to go much deeper in order to tell a story someone's going to want to read. So since we're looking at one variable at a time, let's take a minute and to see how this variable is distributed. So up to the Show Me link, and then Tableau will automatically make a histogram for you of numeric variables. So that means it'll show you how your variable data is distributed. Distributed is kind of how the different points within your variable are arranged. Are they all clustered around one kind of middle value? Or are they all spread out in a variety of ways? Or are they kind of all shoved to one side? Which is kind of how this variable is. If you look here, most of the data of percent sufficient to drink is pushed to the right-hand side. So there's a lot more countries that have, say, more than 90 or 95% of their population that have enough to drink. There is, in fact, a huge number of countries, 99% sufficient to drink is the number held by 251 countries, or that bin. So let's take a minute to understand exactly how this chart is giving us information. This axis here is telling us the count of the countries, and then this axis down here is telling us the bins that the numeric variable is divided into. So bins are sort of like little containers. We don't want to look at only those countries that have 65%. We want to look at the countries that have, say, between 63 and 65%. And that gives us an idea of how the data is kind of arranged. This data is really squished over to the right side, but that's not true for all data. Sometimes data is what's called normal, and which is, of course, a very misused word and very overused word in some ways. So if we look at the variable called change over 4 years, which is a variable that measures what kind of change there's been in the country in sustainability in the past 4 years, we can see that the distribution of this variable, if we look at a histogram of this variable that shows us the distribution, so again, this variable is the actual value of the change put into bins, and this axis is the count. This is much closer to what's called a normal, where there's a few values on this side and a few values on this side, and then a lot of values in the middle. So that's called normal. Again, ours is pushed over to the right, but there are other variables that are pushed over to the left. Let's look at employment, and the employment variable is much more pushed over to the left. So what that means is that there's a lot more countries in this data set that have kind of lower levels of unemployment, and a lot more countries in this data set that have higher levels of percentages of the population with sufficient water to drink. So that's how we're looking at numeric variables when we're just getting a sense of the variable itself. If we want to look at non-numeric variables, that means sort of data that is in strings or that isn't really counting something up, right? We've talked about this in previous modules. So let's look at, we have data by countries. So let's look at the countries that are included here. You can drag the country variable to the row shelf, and it'll show all the countries that have data in our data set. This will also allow us to make maps. Over at the Show Me tab in Tableau, Tableau will automatically make a map for you, which is extremely nice. However, if we see some of these countries are gray, which means that they don't have any data in them, and we know for a fact that we do have data in some of these countries. So that's a clue to look down here on the bottom right. It says "to unknown." So that's an opportunity to figure out which two of our country labels Tableau is not understanding. So click on that, and then we have three choices. We can either edit the locations, in other words, tell Tableau what country it is we mean, filter the data, which means hide those unknowns, or show the data at the default position, which is not going to be helpful in any way. We want to edit our locations. And so this is very helpful. We might have caught this in the data cleaning process, but we didn't. That's fine. You're constantly cleaning your data as you go along. So our label for Congo and the Democratic Republic of Congo are not recognized. See, they're unrecognized by Tableau. So what we want to do is try and fix that. So just click right here, and Tableau will give you a list of the countries it knows about and the names that it calls those countries. So we need to match our two countries. So Congo and the Democratic Republic of Congo are here and here. So this is a problem. Which Congo is which? You're going to have to take a moment and look it up. Click on the one that you want to match it with and push OK. Now you can see that those immediately have data that shows up in it. So each time that you are making any changes, remember you have to write this down, match Congo with new Tableau name for Congo.